Okay, well, I'm showing 2:01 on my phone and my computer, so I'm going to believe it. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our sixth and final of our SHARP Plus Safety Certification webinars for 2022. My name is Morgan Arwood, and I'm the Membership Director for MRCA and the staff person assigned to MRCA's Safety Committee. In terms of all of the OSHA violations that were cited in 2021, coming in at number 1, and with more than twice the citations of the next most cited violation, we have fall protection. It's something we talk about every day. It's the stuff of nightmares. It can cripple your company. It could cripple your psyche. It could cripple your crews. So it's just one of those things that it's talked often and a lot, and we're lucky enough today to have Chris Paulin, who, how many years do you have in the industry, Chris?
42.
So he's forgotten more about fall protection than I will ever know. So anyhow, Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you. I thank you for being here. And then at the end, I will have a few remarks and the code word for those of us who can't be here today. And thank you guys for being here. Go ahead, Chris.
And I tell people I have 42 years in the industry. A lot of folks don't believe it. And the reason is, tequila is a preservative and it just helps. So, Morgan came and asked me if I would do a fall prevention webinar. And I thought to myself, well, geez, we've been hearing this for a long time, okay? I know that this is something that it is constant. And yet, Morgan's absolutely right. Falls are still the number one thing and the number one item in terms of most frequently cited and causing the most injuries and fatalities in the business. I did something because I know that this is routine, okay? And I also know that there's some things that really don't get discussed at all. So I rearranged what I ordinarily do here because I want to focus on a couple of the things that don't get as much attention as I think they should. I have a standard introduction here, okay? OSHA has 28 subparts. There are fall standards, not just in subpart M, but throughout OSHA. And, depending upon what you're doing, you may have to look at subpart M and, any of the other sections related to your work. Scaffolding, for example, the crane standard has requirements for fall prevention. There's a lot of stuff in there. Now, we need to do this because A, people die, B, you're required to do it, and C, the law is very detailed. And one of the things that people don't do well enough is document things. Now, it should be an issue to me that should stand apart because I run my own guys too. And, I don't want to have to go to somebody and say, they're not coming home. Your family member isn't here. Or, a lot of the companies I work with have Spanish-speaking crews. And in those Spanish-speaking crews, there's a lot of family members. You find fathers and sons and uncles and cousins, and you've got entire families that work together sometimes. And this is really an important issue for the groups of people that are there. Statistically, about 1/3 of all fatalities are in construction. I have the exact data for 2020. There were 88 roofers who died in falls. In 2020, which is an off year because of COVID, And there were still 108, I'm sorry, 1,008 fatalities in the construction business in 2020 when everybody was off, and working less than they ordinarily would have. Now, you have to keep records about what you do. If you're doing the things you're supposed to do and you're documenting it and something happens, you have an accident. If you're not doing the things that you're supposed to do, you're negligent. If you do it and you don't write it down, you can't prove you did it. And that kind of still makes you sort of negligent, because even though you did it, you can't prove it. And in the eyes of, the attorneys in the law, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So documenting things is a huge deal. Now, again, statistically, we end up with a lot of people that get hurt percentage-wise. And, what you see here is, fatality statistics, but of all the different kinds of trades, fishermen and hunters and logging workers get hurt more than roofers. Everybody else comes after us. We have the third highest trade of all different individual trades: carpenters, farmers, miners, guys that work in road crew, you name it, police. Our guys get killed more often than anybody else. I spend about another 2 minutes on what's most frequently cited here, and those are fall protection citations. This is from 2020 through 2021, September of last year. The number one thing that gets cited of all the things is duty to have fall protection. That duty to have fall protection means they didn't have anything, okay? It's not like they were using it wrong or improperly, okay? They didn't have anything at all. And you have $28 million worth of fines being issued. This is all construction industry, okay? This 1926-0501 is a construction general duty standard, okay? And, everything you see here, 1926 is, something that's happened in construction. So as you go down this list, and I can make the full list available to you, you find some things are general industry, but they've got some construction work in them. This is strictly construction. And this right here is the top 15 most frequently cited things, okay? You got fall protection and training in, 4 of the top 15 items. Now, subpart M applies to everything except for one thing, and that's the inspection and supervision part of our jobs. I will tell you, in 42 years, the only time I fell through a roof, I was doing a takeoff. It was a brand new job. I have seen other guys fall a couple of times in 42 years. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens. I would tell you that just because somebody's exempt doesn't mean we shouldn't be careful about what they do, okay? When I fell through, I only fell halfway. I stepped through the roof and I ended up to my waist. But if that roof had been compromised anymore, I probably would have gone all the way through. I was lucky. So, just because somebody's exempt doesn't mean we don't have to take care of them. Now, employers have to provide fall protection when there's any possibility of a worker falling more than 6 feet. There are other times as well when it's less than 6 feet. If you're over dangerous equipment, a fall to a lower level, or fall on the same level. If we have a slippery surface and you fall and you land on the surface you're walking on, it's still a fall. Now, leading edge work seems to be the thing that most people focus on. Okay. I know that when we talk about, safety as a roofer, everybody thinks about the leading edge. What I want to do is spend a few minutes here talking about the stuff that we don't really talk about that we should. First is, you've got these types of falls. You got falls from at the same level, and you've got falls at an elevation. When a person falls, they lose their balance. The body unintentionally moves from upright to horizontal. The free fall velocity when somebody falls 12 feet is equal to that of 20 miles an hour. And a person hits the ground in less than 1 second from 12 feet of distance. You fall 12 feet in less than a second. And realistically, you don't even have time to react. So falls are dangerous because when you look at the total distance that a person is going to fall or a person is going to get rescued by fall prevention equipment, there's still an impact associated with the fall. Even a person that's, caught by a harness like this, he still receives the impact of the harness hitting his body. Now, first thing is when we think about falls, we need to think about the distance that somebody's going to fall. This is always measured from foot level before the fall to foot level after the fall. You're not allowed to fall more than 6 feet. And really, 6 feet can kill you. A lot of people that die in falls die from falls at lower levels, not 30, 40, 50 feet in the air. They die from falls off of ladders. So it's not just leading edge work. You can fall off of or through a lot of different things. And the other part, to be aware of is swing fall. When you go over something, you can go straight down and have plenty of room. But if you swing or oscillate from side to side and you hit the wall or hit a beam or something else, you hit that just as hard as if you would, had hit the ground. So, we look at shock absorption and impact. One of the things that I do see is that anchorages and lanyards and harnesses are not always fit correctly. The harness is too loose, the D-ring's in the wrong spot, the anchor is in the wrong place, and the guy can fall more than 6 feet before his fall is arrested. And the most important and frequent thing is this: the body weight of the worker. Okay, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And the bigger they are, the harder it is to get a harness that fits them, because you can't go buy compliance in a can and get a harness that fits a real big guy. And if they're wearing an overcoat or something, clothing for colder weather, all that stuff has to be taken into account. But the single most important thing that I deal with companies that I run into, that I work for, that I interact with, is this: fallen worker rescue. Okay? The employer, this is one of the standards in the law. The employer shall provide for prompt rescue of employees in the event of a fall, or shall assure that employees are able to rescue themselves. Okay? That's one of the standards. So you have to be able to create a plan that permits you to rescue a guy in really 5 minutes or less. And I'm going to explain this part, because usually I talk about this towards the end of these presentations, but we only have an hour here. So I've rearranged this part to put it towards the beginning, because I don't think it gets enough emphasis. All right. Everybody knows you got to have a fall protection plan. We all know you got to put up a warning line, have a safety monitor, wear the harness, put up a guardrail. We all know this. Okay? If we don't do it, shame on us because we know this. Every time I do a fall prevention class, I have to make sure that I dedicate enough time to this part of what happens after a fall. If you've got a guy that falls off a roof and he's wearing a harness, he's only got a short period of time before he gets seriously injured. Now, when someone is suspended in midair, what happens is that the harness restricts the flow of blood in their body. The intention of creating a fallen worker rescue plan is to make sure you can get the guy out of the harness and onto the ground in a reasonable amount of time, which means about 5 minutes. When we look at fallen worker rescue, there are critical phases. Before the fall, when the fall is actually arrested, the suspension part of the guy hanging there, and then the rescue part of the rest of us getting him out of the harness and onto the ground. Okay? Before the fall, what can you do to prevent a fall-related accident? If you've got your guys in harnesses, you can always rig those harnesses, almost always rig those harnesses, that system, for fall restraint rather than fall arrest. You don't have to let them go over the edge, okay? And there's really no reason to do that. Now, there may be instances where you can't find an anchor for the lifeline that permits you to rig fall restraint and reach everything you need to reach, okay? If that's the case, then we need to look for other kinds of anchors, or we have to consider what happens if the guy falls, okay? A restraint lifeline is infinitely better than a fall arrest lifeline, because the things that happen when a guy falls are surprisingly serious, okay? The whole concept of fall protection is that if you do fall, the system is going to stop you. Now, how that happens really depends upon the way the harness fits, where the attachment point to the harness, to the lanyard and the lifeline is relative to your body. If your harness is too loose and the attachment point is down low in the middle of your back, you can get seriously hurt because of that. And we see guys loosen up their harnesses because, it's hot. It's a little uncomfortable to work with. They just have to get used to it if they're going to wear a harness, okay? And where the anchor point actually is, because if you're moving along the leading edge of a roof, for example, okay, your position relative to your anchor will determine how much you're able to fall in free fall if you're not very careful about the positioning of your anchor and the length of your lifeline. Now, the second and most critical issue here is suspension. We assume that when somebody is arrested, falls, and that fall is arrested, you've just saved the guy's life. And realistically, that's not necessarily the case. And we're going to explain why. If you can't get that guy out of the harness, then that guy will suffer, what's called suspension trauma. Now, we'll talk about suspension trauma in a minute here, but fall victims have to be aware that they need to do some things if they're hanging there in the harness. One of the things they need to do if they're hanging in the harness is keep their legs moving. Nobody tells them that. I don't know how many fall classes I taught, before I figured out I was supposed to start telling people some of these additional things, like what happens after you fall. You know, I got relied on to say, this is the rule, this is what you do, always keep your harness on, make sure you're anchored. That was the emphasis. And really the emphasis needs to be equally on this part as well. If a guy falls and he's hanging there in a harness, he has to keep his legs moving. Because if he doesn't keep his legs moving, blood will pool into his legs and not get up to his head. And then that's called, that's what they call suspension trauma. You know, part of this has to do with the impact, part of it has to do with the harness itself. A guy that falls 6 feet into a harness will have bruises complete on his shoulders and across the tops of his thighs. That's how hard he hits. Now, the last phase is the rescue phase. It has to come quick enough, because if a guy can't rescue himself, this suspension trauma is going to begin to affect him. Now, time is of the essence for this. When an employee is suspended, he can lose consciousness in about 5 or 6 minutes. And if he loses consciousness, he can die within 15 because of lack of blood to the brain. Now, that's called orthostatic intolerance. Most of the guys, and this is an OSHA, this comes out of an OSHA publication. Most of the guys that use harnesses are unaware of what suspension trauma is. Some guys know. Most of the guys in bigger companies with safety departments that pay attention to them, guys like you, will tell your folks about suspension trauma. But you also have to tell them things like, you got to keep your legs moving. When you're hanging in a harness, that harness is putting pressure on the legs across your femoral artery, and it's preventing blood from returning to the level of your heart and circulating up to your brain and back around. Orthostatic intolerance is really the technical name for the part of this fall that's going to kill you. If you don't die on impact, you can still die from lack of blood to the brain. Now, the way it happens is this, it's called venous pooling. Blood will collect in the legs, not make it back up to the brain. And when that happens, it causes a person to faint. Now, if you were not in a harness, you would fall over. And your blood would be able to circulate back to your head because you would be horizontal, not vertical. But the problem is when you're in a harness, the harness holds you vertically. It keeps you from falling over. And when you can't fall over, the blood doesn't circulate back up to your brain. So this venous pooling part is hugely important, because once a guy is passed out, there's nothing he can do to help himself. If he's passed out, he's going to stay passed out until somebody gets him down and out of the harness. And he's only got about 5 minutes before that happens. And people don't believe this, but I have not read any piece of literature that says anything different. They all say the same thing. Whatever study there is, it all refers to a time limit maximum of 5 or 6 minutes. After that, you got to pretty much consider the person useless. He won't be able to help rescue himself, and you need to make sure that it's a fully assisted rescue. Now, if he's fallen over, passed out, he's going to be hanging there, there's no self-rescue associated with it. And there are self-rescue and aided rescue things that a guy can do. I have not fallen 6 feet, and I have not physically hit a harness like that myself. So I don't know what it feels like. But I can imagine that when you say to a guy, you've fallen 6 feet, now get yourself back up on the roof, that might be okay for a guy that's 20 years old. All right. If you're looking at a guy that's 45 or 50 years old, all right, that's going to be an issue no matter what. Okay. I was in pretty good shape 15, 20 years ago, and I still think I would have had a hard time trying to climb back up onto the roof. Okay, because that self-rescue part is either you climb up a rescue ladder or you climb down a rescue ladder. Okay, and really, how's that going to happen? The older you are, the harder it's going to get. The bigger you are, the harder the impact. Okay, it just so happens that getting older and getting bigger are two things that happen together quite a lot. Okay, I happen to be much larger now than I was 20, 25 years ago, because your body changes, your musculature changes, your ability to, resist things, your heart, all that stuff, it all changes. Now, venous pooling is an issue. There's three things that aggravate the problem. One, the employee's suspended upright. He can't fall over, the blood won't go back to his head. The second thing is the safety harness straps exert pressure on the femoral arteries by compressing them and reducing the blood flow back to the heart. Okay? And then the third part is the harness keeps you upright. So if you can't recover from this, you can't recover at all. Now, there are some recommended practices here. OSHA recommends you rescue suspended workers as quickly as possible. There's only going to be one way that happens. You have to have a plan, and your people have to know what to do. And that generally requires some practice. Now, I do safety work for the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm an SSHO, Site Safety and Health Officer, okay? You have to demonstrate on occasion to their safety officers that you have these systems and that your people know how to use them. So you have to have the plan has to be in writing, the people have to know what their individual jobs are, okay? Like who goes over to get, the safety pole to grab the guy's D-ring, who goes to try and find, the bucket lift truck or whatever it is that you're going to use, whatever your plan has to be. You can't just make this up. If a guy falls off the roof and the rest of your crew's up there thinking, well, now what are we going to do? That's a first-class problem, okay? Especially if the one guy that falls over the edge of the roof is the one guy on a roof with a brain. If he's the man in charge, and the man in charge is the one that's hanging over the edge of the roof, then the rest of the guys need to know what to do. They need to know where the equipment is, who's going to be responsible for what, who's going to go call 911, all those things, okay? Now, they all also need to know that they only have 5 or 6 minutes, okay? They need to know if it takes them more than 5 minutes and the guy's passed out, what do you do for him when you get him down? There's a first aid function there as well. Okay, so let's say it's gone 6, 7, 8 minutes and the guy's finally, he's been hanging that long, he's passed out, he's finally on the ground, but he's out cold. What are you gonna do? Guys don't realize it. The next thing they need to do is lift his legs. Okay, so there's this basic instruction part that has to come along with every fallen worker rescue plan that tells the guys that are in the field working what they have to do if somebody falls. And that first aid part is probably the most important thing, okay? If they don't know what they're supposed to do, there's no way that it's going to get done. Now, if self-rescue is impossible, this is important, okay? Procedure number 1 is the guy that's hanging there has to pump his legs frequently to try and keep the muscles and the blood flowing. Okay? If you got one of those little, step straps that you can step in, you still need to keep your legs moving to keep your blood flowing. And somebody got to be on the roof yelling at him, telling him to keep doing it. If the guy hits his head on the way down when he falls, he might not be able to do that at all. So, you have to be able to help the guy from the roof. You have to be able to help him, not just physically, but mentally as well. Now, if the worker's unconscious, you want to make sure that you get his airway open, that you've called 911, right? That should be somebody's job right off the bat, okay? That you get his legs moving and you try and make sure that he stays alive until, a rescuer gets there. There's 4 types of rescue. There's self-rescue. There's mechanically aided assisted rescue, where they either haul you up or let you down. Then there's mechanically aided rescue for an unconscious victim. And then there's the kind of a rescue which is also assisted, where you would be able to use an aerial lift of some type. The assisted, the number 2 and number 3 are probably more consistently available on projects. But if you're going to use the kind of system, like, for example, if you got a leading edge Raptor cart or a Cobra cart, it's got a cable winch system in there that you would attach to the guy and haul him up or let him down. All right, but you got to get that extra snap hook onto the D-ring of his harness. So there's a whole process there that actually requires a little bit of practice, because it's not the easiest thing to do. To set up that rescue system, people have to know how to use it, how to get it to connect correctly, and how to make it work. They bring them up, they bring them down. And I understand that if you're trying to bring them up, it's a hand winch. All right, it's not the easiest thing to do. Now, what's recommended under OSHA is a competent rescue person or competent rescuer. A competent rescuer is different than a competent man for fall prevention. A competent man for fall prevention should include competent rescue, because it's an integral part of fall prevention. Just because we don't talk about it as much as we should doesn't mean we're not obligated to do it. It's part of the fall prevention standards, and I have yet to see this competent rescuer offered in one of the commercial programs that are offered in the roofing industry for competent man for fall prevention. Now, we've actually looked at this. We've put together a competent man for fall prevention course, and it really did occur to us that this is a huge hole, and it needs to be addressed. The competent rescuer needs to know certain things. He ought to understand hazard elimination and all the control measures. He ought to understand all the different kinds of fall prevention systems and the regulations that govern each one of those. Assessment of the fall hazards is just as important as anything else. The responsibilities to people on the job and how they're designated needs to be evaluated regularly. When you have personnel changes, obviously the responsibilities of individuals change as well. There needs to be detailed inspection and reporting of inspection equipment. It's just as, of rescue equipment. It's just as important to inspect rescue equipment as it is to inspect fall prevention equipment. If a guy falls because, and he's restrained because his harness is working perfectly, that's half the problem. If the rescue equipment is messed up and you can't get him off, the guy might as well just hit the ground, because at the end result is the same. So if the rescue equipment is not 100%, then what's the point of having it? The rescue systems need to be assessed regularly. You know, they have rescue ladders, which are rope ladders. You might be able to do something with a bosun's chair, which is a way to get a guy to sit down. A lot of different activities can be done to rescue people. However, while you're doing it, you have to consider the safety of the rescuer as well. You got a guy hanging over the edge of the building 6 feet down, and another guy has to get to him to help him, maybe. Because if he can't hook, you know, a hoist line onto his D-ring himself, how are you going to get that done? It's really a significant issue. And at the end of the day, you have not just the person that's hanging there to consider, but the people that are trying to help him as well. And if there's something that's not safe, it doesn't make sense to risk 2 or 3 other guys using that system. All this needs to be put in writing, and it needs to be practiced. And there's one concept here, which is selection and use of non-certified anchorages, which really means this. Anchorages are supposed to be selected by a qualified person. That's somebody who can do the math to prove that the tear-off values of an anchor set into a deck are sufficient, or the structural member is strong enough to hold the anchor, and you get the minimum requirement of 5,000 pounds or whatever they're looking for the specific thing. If you don't have a qualified person available, a competent person needs to select and use a non-certified anchor. A regular competent man for fall prevention isn't qualified to put up an anchor. And I actually have this a little further on with the specific standards that reference it. So somebody's got to select an anchor, somebody's got to select, you know, the way to hook the guys that are going to rescue them, and then you've got to have this entire plan, you know, to get the person onto the ground. The competent person has to be qualified in controlled access zones, guardrails, personal fall arrest systems, safety nets, warning lines, safety monitoring, any system that's going to be used. So the rescuer has to be as competent, really, as a competent man for fall prevention. A competent person for fall prevention that's not trained in rescue isn't qualified to rescue people. They have to have the training. If they don't have the training, they're fine to set the systems up, but you need the person properly prepared to make the correct choices if somebody falls. Now, you have to train competent people. You also have to train roofing workers, okay? There is training requirements for fall protection systems. Each person needs to be trained by a competent person. That means, you know, I've even heard attorneys say, well, the employer can just say this person's a competent person. I know that my attorney says, you better have something in writing to back that up, okay? And that's a big deal, because you can't just go say, okay, my foreman's a competent person. He's been doing this for 20 years. What kind of training has he had? Does he know all these different kind of anchorages and conditions, et cetera? All the irregularities and the variations in the rules. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to know as a competent person. All training of individuals on a roof needs to be done by somebody who's qualified. I would tell you that when I became an OSHA instructor, I passed a 500 level class. That did not qualify me to be a competent person for fall prevention. I had to take extra training, and I've worked with fall equipment for over a decade. I worked for a company that manufactured it as well, the Panther Equipment Company out of Missouri. They had fall protection cards, guardrail, all that stuff. All right. And I've worked with this. I've been factory trained with things. And I still had to take an extra class to qualify me to do this. There's an OSHA fall prevention class. It's 2 days long. And I took it so so I could actually be qualified to provide this training. Your regular OSHA guy, your regular trainer who comes in, he gives you the OSHA 10-hour certification, he gives you the OSHA 30, that's really all he's good for. You can get fall protection awareness training, but you can't train a guy to the level of authorized user unless he's being trained by a competent person. And when we talk about competent people, it's one thing to be competent going over the edge or preventing people from going over the edge. It's another thing to get them back up onto the roof or down onto the ground. Those are two separate subjects. And I know that this rescue component is something that's distinct and different. And I didn't go through rescue training until I went through the Army Corps of Engineers safety program, because the regular OSHA program only requires it by reference, okay? It says you have to have a competent person for rescue, but they don't tell you what that means or what, how you get it. All right, I ended up doing it, with the Army Corps of Engineers training program. And this realistically is something that everybody that's working a crew on a roof needs to have their people trained in and aware of. Retraining, obviously it occurs when the systems change or somebody demonstrates that they don't understand what they should be doing. Now, I guess if, falls don't happen every day, how does somebody evidence to you that they need to be trained in rescue? All right. I guess that only happens after somebody falls and the rescuer fails to rescue them. So fallen worker rescue training ought to be something that's like scheduled once every 12 months. Every new guy that comes into the company ought to go through, once annual training of, how the rescue equipment works and what they're supposed to do. All training must be verified, okay? You have to keep a written record of training. Now, 29 CFR 1926.503, it says verification of training. That applies to everybody. It's not just that they got fall prevention awareness training. If you have a competent man, you have to document what makes him a competent man. I swear to God, okay? We get people that they don't seem to understand, yeah, an employer can designate a competent person, but he's got to have the paperwork to support it. Now, there's a lot of different fall prevention standards. Are there any questions about the need for fallen worker rescue programs? Okay. Usually I talk about fall prevention standards before I talk about fallen worker rescue, but I know that we're going to be time limited and I really only got like 15 minutes, so I want to just go through a couple of quick things, okay? An employer has a responsibility. The first thing he is responsible for is making sure that the roof deck is strong enough to support not just the people that are on it, but the people and the weight of all the materials that he's going to put on there. And if you're tearing off and piling stuff on one side of the roof, everything that gets, you're talking about the maximum weight, live load, not dead load, that you're putting on the structure. So you have to do some kind of evaluation. You have to document this, okay? You walk through the building on the underside, look at the deck, you say, okay, the deck looks like it's in good condition. From the underside, you need to core cut and make sure it's not totally rotten from the top down. That way you can say you've verified that there's walking working surfaces appear to be in good condition. That doesn't mean that you won't make a mistake or there's not a little rust spot in one side, you know, and not where you cut it. You can only do so many core cuts on a roof, right? But you do have to make some kind of an effort with respect to the due diligence. And then once you've determined that the deck is safe to walk on, the employer must determine whether fall protection is required. And that's that whole decision tree about what you're going to do. What kind of fall prevention systems should you use? You know, most of us default directly to a warning line and a safety monitor. Why? Because it's the least expensive. Really what you need to do is for each project, you need to have a fall protection plan prepared by a qualified person and developed specifically for each site. Now, that's a regulation. It's one of the standards, 29.502K1. It says exactly that. It's copied and pasted. All right. A fall protection plan must be prepared by a qualified person. Basically, that's somebody that can do the mathematics and knows all the things that they're supposed to know about the structures of the building to make sure that the anchorages are correct. If you default to a warning line, just because that's what you always do, then, you know, 97, 98% of the time, that's going to be just fine. It's that small percentage of the time where it's not really adequate that's going to get, and what does get people into trouble, okay? There's over 1,000 workers a year die in construction work. Why? Because we're not looking at the hierarchy of controls. We're defaulting to the least expensive, easiest method to use. And we tend to downplay fall prevention in favor of production. And I spent years working for a fairly large union shop out of New York City. I know exactly what it is that the mentality is like. Now, the fall prevention plan must be maintained, kept up to date. If there's any changes on your project, you have to change the plan. Okay, any changes to the plan have to be approved by a qualified person. 29 CFR 1926.502K2. That's a standard. So if you got to change the plan, a qualified person needs to sign off on it. And once the plan changes, a competent person has to supervise the implementation of the plan. That's 29 1926.502K4. So you're required to have a competent person on every job. Who's that going to be? Could be the owner of the company, safety manager, a foreman, you know, but if you look at the definition of what a competent person is, a competent person is somebody who can recognize a hazard and has the authority to make the corrections and the changes. Okay? Well, that means, you know, you got to have somebody who can recognize a hazard at any point in time. That probably ought to be a foreman who's there in charge of the job for you, you know, on a everyday full-time basis. Because if something happens and there's no competent person there, how's somebody else going to make the change or the correction? So you really need to consider where competent people are and what their responsibilities are, and what, as owners of companies, our responsibilities are, not just to the people on the roof, but to the owners of the company as well. Because if you don't have a competent person and nobody makes a change, you know, to something that's deficient and somebody gets hurt, it puts your company back at risk. And, you know, the whole reason for doing this is, you know, to protect the people and protect the businesses that are investing in this. You know, your company has a lot of value. You know, people put their souls into these companies, and we want to see you keep them. So, you know, employers must provide fall protection training. That has to be done by a competent person. We have the standard for it, okay? All these things tie together. And if your regular old safety guy can't come to you and prove that he's competent, then you need another safety guy. Or you need to look for somebody qualified to do those specific things that you require. You don't have to get rid of the guy. You just have to recognize what his limitations are. Now, a competent person for fall prevention has to be qualified in the following areas. The nature of fall hazard, so it's a hazard recognition process, and the correct procedures for erecting, maintaining, disassembling, and inspecting the systems. So you have hazard recognition and hazard controls. If the default method is always a warning line and a safety monitor, then you have to make sure that even those warning lines comply with the rules. They're not supposed to sag, for example. There's a breaking strength to a warning line. There are rules about that. So even the little things, you know, those are the things that are going to catch you. With every trade except for roofing, controlled access zones, guardrails, personal fall arrests, and safety nets are required. Only for roofers do they permit warning lines and safety monitoring systems. So we're the exception to the rule. Anybody else is up on your job, they have to follow different rules. The way I understood this, and when I went to ask my lawyer, that means if an HVAC contractor comes on a job and he's outside the warning line, you better put a harness on him. He can't work with your safety monitor because it's only in the roofing crew. Now, it's one of those things where I think my lawyer's a little tight, and I guess, you know, that it is what it is, but that was his interpretation. Each worker in the safety monitoring system, if you're using a safety monitor, has a role. What I've done is I've highlighted some of these things that are important in red, and we're not going to have time to finish all this, so I want to skip to a couple of things, okay? Your safety monitor must be a competent person. The statute that says that is 1926.502H1. You're required to have a competent person as a safety monitor. That means he has to be trained in the recognition of fall hazards. If you have a guy that's up there as a safety monitor on a job and he hasn't been trained in the recognition of fall hazards, well, you go, A, what good is he? B, he doesn't comply with the law. And, you know, C, you've got to consider as a company how that affects you. It's simple to give the guy a 30-minute class in hazard recognition, put a letter in the file, in his personnel folder or in your safety files that says he's qualified as a competent person to work as a safety monitor. Now, I work with a couple of contractors that use safety monitors all the time, and basically they rotate their crews. You know, if you got 3 guys working in a crew that are getting near the edge of the roof and you got 5 guys towards the center, they'll bring one of the guys from the center in to work as a safety monitor for the other 3, and it's kind of a fungible position. It's, you know, you can interchange these guys as long as there's something in their file that says every one of them has been trained in hazard recognition. And that's not hazard awareness, that's hazard recognition. You can give, you know, 2 hours worth of fall prevention awareness to a guy, but that doesn't train him specifically as a competent person. You have to give them a test. How are you going to be able to prove that a guy is competent? Does he know what it is? Prove it. Well, take a test. That way you can at least cross the T's, dot the I's, and take that and, put it away. Not one of the things you need to focus on. Lifelines, in particular, horizontal lifelines, guardrail systems. All these things need to be tested and approved, technically by a qualified person, which is an engineer certification. I know that if you go to 3M or Honeywell and buy a pre-engineered lifeline, it comes with a certificate of compliance. If you go out and go to Leading Edge or Garlock, you buy a turbo rail system, you request a certificate of compliance, their engineers will write a certificate that says this system complies. Probably easier to get that up front than it is to go digging for it afterwards. And there are a couple of tier 2, tier 3 manufacturers of roofing systems that cheat. They say they have it, but they don't really. When you go to investigate them, it looks like it's less expensive because it is, because it may not really comply. And you got to be real careful with that, because if it doesn't comply, you have fatality on a job. You've got people looking at everything. And one of the clients I worked for was Whiting Turner out of Washington, D.C. They had 5 people die in 1 year in 5 separate accidents. And they had independent engineers on their job every day for 2 months after every fatality. And it was stupid stuff. A guy stepping through a hole on the same day that they had a toolbox talk about covering up holes. They had a language issue. They weren't correctly communicating with their Spanish-speaking employees. When you talk half Spanish, half English to a Spanish-speaking employee, and he's nodding his head and saying yes or sí, that really means no. He doesn't get it. You have to converse with him in Spanish. And if you're not teaching him in a language he understands, you can't really count on him to know what he's supposed to do. And, if it's, 5 Spanish-speaking guys on the crew and one of the 2, English-speaking guys goes over the edge, I would think that you want all the Spanish-speaking guys to understand what their responsibilities are for rescue. So teaching guys in Spanish that speak Spanish is really very important, because they don't speak well enough, and they just seem to be, a little too proud to say, yeah, I really don't get it. I worked for Firestone for 11 years. 6 of those were in Mexico, and it took me 2 years to figure out. Nobody understood what I was talking about. I had to speak fully in Spanish. I had no choice. But they would all go, yeah, and I go, what happened? And you get this. They don't know. So, basically, those are the kinds of things that are important here. I've highlighted stuff in red. This presentation is available to anybody that wants it. I also have a hazard recognition presentation. If you want it, just let Morgan know and I'll send it out to you. All right. The things that we've noted in red, you may not see them here, but in the speaker's notes below it, I have the specific regulations that whatever's highlighted in red refers to. Now, it says here, PFA, personal fall arrest systems must be inspected prior to each use. That's 1926.502 D16V. Okay? And if it says they have to be inspected before each use, somebody's got to write something down. So we are basically, out of time here. If anybody wants to keep on going, I can do that. If anybody wants to bail out, or because you've got other things, we have all this information available. You can have this presentation, and like I said, in the speaker's notes, it gives the specific references and explanations. This right here, for example, horizontal lifelines must be designed, installed, and used under the supervision of a qualified person. It's a horizontal lifeline, okay? It's qualified person, not competent person. That means the person that does it has to be able to do the math to make sure it will resist the forces of impact if 2 guys hit the line at the same time or 3 guys hit the line at the same time. If they all fall off as a group, you've got to count their weight as a group, and the lifeline, if it's certified for 2 people or 3 people or 4 people, the lifeline has to be able to support the weight of all of them combined. And the engineer needs to be able to do the math to demonstrate that. So, if you've got any questions, we're always available. Anchors must be used under the supervision of a qualified person. You can't just go connect an anchor to something on a roof. If your competent person does it, not your qualified person, but your competent person, it's called a non-certified anchorage. Logically, it could be fine. You get a choker on an I-beam and it's fine. Okay, we all know that. But it's not certified compliant by a qualified person. It's only by a competent person. Therefore, it falls into a lesser compliance category. Okay? And, other areas that require fall protection plans. This is the last thing, I promise. You can use a fall protection plan if you can demonstrate that conventional fall prevention systems are not feasible. As a roofer, I can't think of one. The example would be this. You can't use a harness system because there's no acceptable anchor. There's always an anchor. Okay? There's always something to anchor to. It could be a mobile fall prevention cart, but there's always an anchor. Okay? An alternative way to work may be to put 2 people in a man lift and have them do the outside edge from a man lift. So there's always ways to skin the cat, okay? There is a complete publication on this. It's OSHA publication 3146. I have that available as well. I'll send it to Morgan, and you all can use it as you see fit, but there are elements to a plan. Anybody got any questions? I think I'm 8 minutes over, 4 minutes over. All right.
I would like copies of that program that you did.
Sure.
Yeah, I can jump in. So typically what we do is send out an email after, post recording, and it'll have all of the presentations and the link to this recording. So we'll get that out to everybody. And Chris, thank you so much. Thanks for helping us with another session. And for the fresh take on an old conversation. I mean, it's, one of those things you think you've heard it all and you haven't. Okay, anyway, housekeeping. Okay, so today's code word is 6 feet. So if you are watching this post recording, please email me with the code word 6 feet to get credit. I have an important reminder for everyone on this call and those who might be watching post recording. In order to qualify as a Sharp Plus Safety Certified company, you must complete the Elite Safety Award application and receive a bronze level or better. You have already paid for the cost of this application when you submitted for your Sharp Plus Safety Certification program. That fee covers the Elite Safety Award. So when you go to apply, please use the promo code, it's all caps, SHARP 2022. This will help you forego that charge that you will see. This information will also be in your email inbox, but just, as a as a reminder. And here's a hint. When you go to complete the application, grab the questions from the online form and then answer them in a Word document. Then you'll copy and paste your answers into the online form and complete that way. And here's why. If you were to get interrupted or if there was a glitch on the computer, internet, whatever, and you leave the page without submitting, all your work will be lost, and we don't want that for you. Your time is precious. You can call, email, text me anytime if you have any questions. The deadline for the Elite Safety Award Program application is July 1st. So that gives us about 24 more days to get that application in. Another announcement. MRCA has 2 awards that they offer each year. One is called the Impact Award, and the other is called the Innovation Award. We have just opened up the online application for nomination on our website, and you'll be getting email notifications. But there's nothing we love more than highlighting our wonderful members. The Impact Award is awarded to an MRCA member company that has demonstrated a commitment to improving the well-being of communities or individuals through philanthropy or community service demonstrated at a local or national level. And I know you guys are constantly giving back to your community. Let's highlight that. The Industry Innovation Award recognizes suppliers and manufacturers who have contributed to the advancement of the roofing industry through innovations or product development related to safety, technology, efficiency, or environment, and significantly improve the well-being of the roofing contractor. So if there's somebody in your life that has done any of those things, please nominate them via our website. The deadline to apply for the Impact or Innovation Awards will be August 1. Last thing, our joint conference with RCAT is just about to sell out booth space for our conference. I mean, sold out. This is going to be an awesome show. So save the dates, September 27th through the 29th, and plan on joining us in beautiful Fort Worth, Texas, for what is gearing up to be an epic trade show. We hope to see you there. I guess we won't see each other again for a webinar until next year. So on behalf of MRCA's Board of Directors, members, and staff, thank you for making safety a priority for your company, and thank you for participating in this program. I am here for you year-round, so reach out anytime I might be helpful. That's all I have for today, folks. I hope you have a great week, and as always, stay safe out there. Bye.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, you guys.